I suspect my fiancé of cheating with my best friend. So I make a plan and break the news about my fake pregnancy to catch them. I was not expecting what else I got to know later. I, 28F, have been living with my fiancé, John, 30M, for the past 2 years. We're getting married in 3 months. My best friend, Sarah, 27F, lives nearby and visits us frequently. She has a boyfriend, but she spends most of her free time at our house. At first, I didn't think much of Sarah's frequent visits. She's been my best friend since high school, and we've always been close. But lately, I started noticing some things that made me uncomfortable. Sarah and John seemed to be getting along really well. Too well, in my opinion. They had inside jokes I didn't understand. They often sat close to each other on the couch when we watched movies. Sometimes I'd walk into a room and they'd suddenly stop talking, like they were hiding something. I tried to brush it off as paranoia, but the feeling wouldn't go away. I started paying more attention to their interactions. I noticed how Sarah's eyes would light up when John entered the room, how John would laugh a little too hard at her jokes, how they'd find excuses to touch each other, a pat on the shoulder here, a playful punch there. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was going on between them. The thought of my best friend and my fiancé having an affair was killing me inside. I decided to look for evidence. When John was in the shower, I checked his phone, but there were no suspicious texts or calls. I looked through his email and social media, but found nothing out of the ordinary. I was driving myself crazy with suspicion, but I had no solid proof. I couldn't confront them without evidence. What if I was wrong? I'd ruin my relationship with both of them over nothing. But I couldn't just sit back and do nothing either. So, I came up with a plan. It wasn't the most ethical thing to do, but I was desperate. I called Sarah and asked her to come over when John wasn't home. When she arrived, I told her I had something important to tell her. "Sarah, I'm pregnant," I lied. Her eyes widened. "What? Are you sure?" I nodded. I took 3 tests. They were all positive. "Oh my God," she said. "Have you told John yet?" I shook my head. "No, and I need you to promise me you won't tell him." "Why not?" she asked. "Because I'm not sure if I want to keep it," I said. "And I don't know how John will react. I need time to figure things out before I tell him." Sarah looked uncomfortable. "Okay, I won't tell him. But don't you think he has a right to know?" "I'll tell him soon," I said. "I just need some time. Promise me you won't say anything." "I promise," she said. But she didn't look happy for me. In fact, she looked almost disappointed. After Sarah left, I sat down and thought about her reaction. She hadn't seemed genuinely happy for me. If anything, she'd looked upset. Was it because she was having an affair with John and didn't want me to have his baby? Or was I reading too much into things? I decided to wait and see what happened next. Would Sarah keep her promise not to tell John? Or would she run to him with the news? The next day, John came home from work acting normal. He didn't mention anything about a pregnancy. So either Sarah had kept her promise, or there was nothing going on between them. But I wasn't satisfied. I needed to know for sure. So I decided to continue with my plan. A few days later, I invited Sarah over again. This time, I told her I had decided to keep the baby. "I'm going to tell John tonight," I said. "I'm nervous, but I think he'll be happy." Sarah forced a smile. "That's great," she said, but her voice lacked enthusiasm. "I'm sure he'll be thrilled." I watched her closely as we talked. She seemed distracted and kept checking her phone. Was she itching to text John? To warn him? That evening, I waited for John to come home. I was curious to see if he'd act any differently. Would Sarah have warned him despite her promise? Update that evening, I sat on the couch, my heart racing as I waited for John to come home. The sound of his key in the lock made me jump. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for what was to come. The living room felt too small suddenly, the air thick with tension even before John stepped inside. John walked in, his face unreadable. He barely glanced at me as he hung up his coat and kicked off his shoes. The usual warmth in his eyes was missing, replaced by a cold, distant look that sent a chill down my spine. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual, but my voice came out slightly higher than usual. "How was your day?" He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Fine." I frowned, confused by his cold demeanor. This wasn't like John at all. Usually he'd greet me with a kiss and tell me all about his day, his eyes lighting up as he shared the little details of his work life. Now he seemed like a stranger in our home. "Is everything okay?" I asked, following him into the kitchen. The tiles felt cold under my bare feet, matching the icy atmosphere between us. He opened the fridge, his back to me. "Yeah, why wouldn't it be?" I hesitated, unsure how to proceed. This wasn't how I'd imagined this conversation going. The script I'd prepared in my head suddenly seemed useless. I just thought, maybe we could talk? John slammed the fridge door shut, making me flinch. The sound echoed through the kitchen, seeming to reverberate off the walls. He turned to face me, his eyes blazing with anger. Talk? You want to talk now? I took a step back, startled by his sudden outburst. My back hit the kitchen counter, and I gripped its edge for support. John, what's wrong? He let out a bitter laugh, the sound harsh and unfamiliar. What's wrong? How about you tell me, huh? How about you explain to me how you could do this? My heart sank. He knew. Somehow he knew about the pregnancy lie. But how? Had Sarah broken her promise? The thought of my best friend betraying me sent a fresh wave of pain through my chest. Do what? I asked, playing dumb even as my mind raced. I could feel my palms growing sweaty against the cool countertop. John's face contorted with rage. Don't act innocent. How could you get pregnant? I blinked, caught off guard by his reaction. This wasn't at all what I'd expected. The room seemed to tilt slightly and I had to focus to keep my balance. What? You heard me, he spat. How can you be pregnant? I frowned, genuinely confused now. His anger seemed out of proportion, even if he had found out about my lie. John, I don't understand. Why are you so angry about this? He slammed his fist on the counter, making me jump. The fruit bowl rattled and an apple rolled onto the floor, the thud seeming unnaturally loud in the tense silence. Because it's impossible. It can't be mine. My mouth fell open as the implications of his words sank in. A cold dread began to seep through me. What do you mean it can't be yours? John ran a hand through his hair, his anger giving way to frustration. He suddenly looked tired, older than his years. I'm infertile, okay? I can't have children, so there's no way you could be pregnant with my baby. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. John was infertile? How long had he known this? Why hadn't he told me? The kitchen suddenly felt too small, the walls closing in around me. I didn't know, I stammered. When did you find out? He let out a heavy sigh, leaning against the refrigerator, as if he needed its support. I've known for years. I should have told you sooner, I know. But I was afraid. Afraid you might not want to marry me if you knew. My mind was reeling. All this time, John had been carrying this secret. But that wasn't the most pressing issue right now. The implications of what he was saying began to sink in, and a new kind of dread filled me. John, I said slowly, each word feeling heavy on my tongue. If you're infertile, then why do you think I'm pregnant? He looked at me, his eyes filled with hurt and betrayal. The pain in his gaze was almost unbearable. Don't play dumb. Sarah told me everything. I felt a surge of anger. So Sarah had broken her promise after all. But why? Was it out of loyalty to John because of their affair? Or was there more to it? The betrayal stung, sharp and bitter. I realized I needed to tread carefully. I still didn't have concrete proof of John and Sarah's affair, and now the situation had become even more complicated. The plan I'd set in motion had spiraled out of control, and I was struggling to keep up. John, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I think there's been a misunderstanding. He scoffed, the sound harsh and derisive. A misunderstanding? You cheated on me. How is that a misunderstanding? I took a deep breath, deciding to play along for now. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but I needed to see where this would lead. It was just one time, I lied, hating myself for it but needing to uncover the full truth. With a coworker, it didn't mean anything. John's face crumpled, a mix of anger and pain. The sight of his anguish cut me to the core. How could you do this to me, after everything we've been through? I felt horrible. Even though I knew I hadn't actually cheated, seeing John's pain was almost unbearable. The guilt of my lie weighed heavily on me, making it hard to breathe. I'm sorry, I said softly, the words feeling inadequate. I made a mistake. But John, can we talk about why you didn't tell me you were infertile? That's a pretty big thing to keep secret. He let out a bitter laugh, the sound hollow and pained. Oh, so now you want to talk about secrets? Fine, let's talk about secrets. You want to know why I didn't tell you? Because I was afraid of losing you. But I guess that didn't matter in the end, did it? I flinched at the venom in his voice. Each word felt like a physical blow. John, please, I said I was sorry, can't. We work through this? He shook his head, his anger seeming to deflate, leaving only sadness. The fight seemed to drain out of him, leaving behind a shell of the man I thought I knew. I don't know if we can. I don't know if I can trust you anymore. I felt tears pricking at my eyes. This was all going so wrong. I hadn't meant for things to spiral out of control like this. The weight of my lie and the consequences it had unleashed pressed down on me. John, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Is there anything else you want to tell me? Anything else you've been keeping secret? He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched between us, thick and oppressive. Then, as if a dam had broken, words started pouring out of him. You want to know the truth? Fine. I've been having an affair with Sarah. The words hit me like a physical blow. Even though I'd suspected it, hearing John confirm it out loud was devastating. The room seemed to spin, and I had to grip the counter to steady myself. How long? I managed to choke out, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. John sighed, running a hand over his face. He suddenly looked exhausted, as if the weight of his confession had aged him years in moments. A few months. It started innocently enough. We were just talking one day and something clicked. I didn't mean for it to happen, but I felt like I was going to be sick. The betrayal of it all, not just John, but Sarah too, was overwhelming. But it did happen, you and my best friend, behind my back. He had the decency to look ashamed, his eyes unable to meet mine. I'm sorry. I know it doesn't make it right, but I am sorry. I stood there, my mind whirling. All this time I'd been right. They had been having an affair. But now, with my lie about the pregnancy, I'd complicated everything even further. The web of deceit we'd all woven seemed to tighten around us, threatening to suffocate us all. So, I said, my voice eerily calm, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. Let me get this straight. You've been cheating on me with my best friend. You kept the fact that you're infertile from me, and now you're angry at me for a pregnancy that isn't even real? John's head snapped up, confusion replacing the guilt in his eyes. What do you mean, isn't even real? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. The moment of truth had arrived, and there was no going back now. I'm not pregnant, John. It was a lie, a test. His eyes widened in disbelief, a myriad of emotions flashing across his face: shock, confusion, anger. A test? What the hell are you talking about? I suspected something was going on between you and Sarah, I explained, my voice growing stronger with each word. The truth, as painful as it was, felt liberating. I couldn't prove it, so I came up with a plan. I told Sarah I was pregnant and made her promise not to tell you. I wanted to see if she'd keep that promise. John stared at me, shock written all over his face. He looked like he'd been punched in the gut. You lied about being pregnant? Just to test us? I nodded, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. And you both failed. Sarah broke her promise to me, and you just confirmed everything I suspected. He slumped against the counter, looking defeated. The anger seemed to drain out of him, replaced by a weary resignation. I can't believe this. All of this, it's all been a lie? Not all of it, I said quietly, the weight of the situation settling over us both. Your affair with Sarah, that was real. Your infertility, that's real too. The only lie here was my pregnancy. John shook his head as if trying to clear it. He looked lost, adrift in the sea of revelations we'd both unleashed. I don't know what to say. This is all so messed up. I felt a surge of anger, the hurt and betrayal of the past months rising to the surface. Messed up? You're the one who cheated, John. You're the one who kept secrets. Don't try to turn this around on me. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and regret. The man I thought I knew, the man I'd agreed to marry, suddenly seemed like a stranger. You're right, I messed up, but so did you. Lying about a pregnancy? That's not okay, no matter what your reasons were. I knew he was right, but I wasn't ready to back down. The righteousness of my anger fueled me. Maybe not. But at least my lie was to uncover the truth. Your lies were just to cover your own ass. We stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of everything that had happened settling over us. The kitchen, once a place of warmth and shared meals, now felt cold and alien. The life we'd built together seemed to crumble around us. Finally, I spoke, my voice barely above a whisper. I think we both know where this is going. John nodded slowly, resignation etched in every line of his face. Yeah, I think we do. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I knew I had to do. The words felt heavy, final, as I spoke them. I can't marry you, John. Not after this. Not knowing you've been lying to me, cheating on me with my best friend. He didn't argue, which somehow made it worse. His acceptance felt like another betrayal. I understand. I slipped the engagement ring off my finger, the diamond catching the light one last time before I placed it on the counter between us. The small clink it made seemed to echo in the silent kitchen, a period at the end of our relationship. I'll pack my things and be out by the end of the week. John nodded, not meeting my eyes. The defeat in his posture was palpable. For what it's worth, I am sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I laughed humorlessly, the sound brittle and harsh. Yeah, well, it did happen. And now we all have to live with the consequences. As I turned to leave the kitchen, I paused, one last barb on my tongue. Oh, and John? Make sure you tell Sarah the truth, that I'm not really pregnant. Wouldn't want her thinking she's going to be an aunt or something. I walked out, leaving John standing there in the kitchen, a broken man in the ruins of our shared life. As I closed the bedroom door behind me, I finally let the tears fall. Everything I'd thought I knew, everything I'd planned for my future, had crumbled in a matter of minutes. The bedroom, once our shared sanctuary, now felt alien and cold. I moved around it in a daze, pulling out suitcases and boxes, mechanically beginning to pack my life away. Each item I touched held a memory, some good, some bad, all of them now tainted by the revelations of the evening. As I folded clothes and wrapped fragile items, my mind raced over the events of the past few months, the subtle signs I'd noticed, the growing suspicion, the desperate plan I'd concocted. I thought about Sarah, my best friend since high school, and how easily she'd betrayed me. The pain of that betrayal was almost worse than John's infidelity. But as I cried, packing away the remnants of my old life, I felt something else too. Relief. Relief that I'd uncovered the truth before I'd made the mistake of marrying a man who could lie to me so easily. Relief that I now knew who my so-called best friend really was. It was a painful, costly lesson, but perhaps a necessary one. I thought about the future stretching out before. Me, suddenly unknown and frightening. The life I'd planned, the future I'd envisioned with John, had vanished like smoke. But in its place was possibility, the chance to start over, to build something new and honest. It wasn't the outcome I'd wanted when I'd concocted my plan. The hurt was raw and real, the betrayal a wound that would take time to heal. But maybe, in the long run, it was the outcome I needed. A clean break, a chance to start over, a chance to find someone who would be honest with me, who would love me truly and faithfully. As I continued to pack, sorting through the physical remnants of my relationship with John, I found myself sorting through my emotions as well. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, they were all there, swirling inside me. But underneath it all was a growing sense of strength. I had survived this. I had uncovered the truth, painful as it was. And I would move forward. I thought about the lies we had all told, John's secret about his infertility, his affair with Sarah, my fake pregnancy. We had all contributed to this web of deceit, and we were all paying the price. But I made a silent promise to myself as I zipped up the last suitcase. No more lies, no more games. From now on, I'd face life head-on, with honesty and integrity. It wouldn't be easy. I knew there would be days ahead when the pain would feel overwhelming, when the loneliness would threaten to consume me. But I also knew that I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. I had survived this betrayal, had even managed to uncover the truth through my own cunning. That strength would carry me forward. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the curtains, I looked around the now bare room. It was strange how quickly a space could go from feeling like home to feeling like just another room. But as I picked up my bags and prepared to leave, I felt a sense of lightness. The truth, painful as it was, had set me free. I took one last look around the apartment that had been my home for the past 2 years. So many memories, good and bad, were contained within these walls. But it was time to move on, to write a new chapter. As I closed the door behind me, stepping out into the cool morning air, I took a deep breath. The future stretched out before me, unknown and a little scary, but full of possibility. It might not be easy, but it would be real. And after everything that had happened, real was exactly what I needed.